Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa. It's Wednesday, August 21st. I am Shaka Sali.
Well, hello to you, Shaka, and hello to all our viewers and listeners on the continent and in the diaspora. I'm Mariama Diallo, your social media reporter.
Today, we'll discuss Egypt in crisis.
And coming up later in our social media segment, you, our audience, have given your opinion on our topic through your emails, YouTube, and Facebook comments. We'll reveal some of them ahead on Straight Talk Africa.
Egypt continues to be in turmoil, where former leader Hosni Mubarak could be out of jail by the end of the week. And the military has the Muslim Brotherhood on the run. But none of these developments seem to be easing tensions inside the country. And with Egypt's allies, my colleague Elizabeth Arrott has more from Cairo.
An Egyptian court has ordered the release of ex-President Hosni Mubarak on charges of corruption. Officials say he could be freed within 2 days unless the prosecutor's office decides to enter an appeal. He would still face a retrial on other charges. The United Nations Political Affairs Chief is in Cairo to meet with and seek reconciliation between the military-backed interim government and the Muslim Brotherhood, the focus of a week-long security crackdown. Undersecretary General Jeffrey Felton's challenge is daunting. The Brotherhood spiritual guide, Mohammed Badia, was arrested Tuesday, and his temporary replacement, Mohammed Azat, has an arrest warrant out for him as well. Mohamed Morsi, the Islamist president ousted by the military last month, has been remanded for another 15 days of custody in an undisclosed location. Hundreds of other Brotherhood members have been detained in recent days. In another blow to the 85-year-old organization, Egypt's interim leaders are working on a new draft constitution, one that would explicitly ban religious-based political parties. The move would likely be welcomed by many in Egypt who felt Mr. Morsi failed to keep his pledge to move beyond a Brotherhood agenda and build an inclusive government. Political analyst Hisham Qasim.
They need to play according to the rules of politics, not as the representatives of God on earth.
But after the violence of the past week, political reconciliation still seems far away. Along with the arrests, hundreds of people have been killed, most of them anti-government protesters, but also dozens of security personnel. Christians are also under attack, with dozens of their churches burned. Even moderate politician, Nobel Prize-winning Mohamed El-Baradei, who resigned the interim vice presidency over the bloodshed, is facing a court appearance for breaching national trust. Elizabeth Arrett, VOA News, Cairo.
Now, for more on the latest developments in Egypt, I am joined by my colleague, VOA's Middle East correspondent, Elizabeth Arrott, who joins us live from the Egyptian capital, of course, of Cairo via Skype. Good evening, Elizabeth.
Good evening, Shaka.
How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
Please walk us through the mood on the ground. What is the mood like, Elizabeth?
It's extremely polarized. It's almost as if there are two Egypts right now. We have the Brotherhood, as we've mentioned, really underground, in hiding, just trying to even get some of the leaders, elected politicians, people who were running the government just 2 months ago, who are in hiding and fearful for their lives. We have families grieving for the people who have been killed in the last week. And then on the other hand, you have a very large part of the population who seems happy that the military has taken over and are taking these measures against the Brotherhood. And it's very hard, people, very kind people, but they feel less regret than one might imagine at the bloodshed and the turmoil, and just very happy to see some kind of order, or what's being seen as order, from the military being reimposed.
What about reports that there is some kind of semblance of normalcy, at least returning to the capital, Cairo, during the day? Any truth about that?
Certainly during the day, and it seemed to pick up again Sunday. That was about, 3 or 4 days after the big crackdown on the camps on Wednesday. Once again, the streets were crowded. It was crazy. Cairo traffic, people were out doing business. Mind you, that is just during the day. Starting around 5 o'clock, people are rushing home to get back into some kind of safety before the curfew is reimposed. And throughout the night, even in my neighborhood, which is fairly safe, quiet usually, you hear gunfire all night long. So it's not normal, but at least there is some business resuming. It's not the empty streets that we saw in the beginning, and there's still many tanks and APCs all around the city.
Any signs that there are still some people who are defying the curfew or trying to defy the curfew?
Less and less each night. There certainly were in the beginning people coming out, big rallies. Then the Brotherhood, starting about Sunday, started calling off some for security reasons. Still throughout the country, you'll see small ones. And then again, just the various clashes and some very bad incidents of fighting. But by and large, it's not these mass protests we saw in the first few days.
Talk to us, Elizabeth, about reaction from the ground regarding the apparent statement that former President Hosni Mubarak may in fact be freed within the next 48 hours.
Well, that really throws yet another curveball into all of this. Of course, the revolution in 2011 was to have him out of power, and many people wanted him brought to justice. The idea that he might be let go and is very confusing for some people in that they have supported what the military is doing. This may be for some of them a step too far. It's not clear for all the statements that he'll be released within 24 hours. I have spoken to people very close to the military people close to the government who say it probably won't happen, but still it would just add one more element of uncertainty and strangeness to this already very strange situation.
What is it like covering the story from your vantage point, Elizabeth?
I must say they're making it very difficult for all journalists, both Egyptian and for foreign media especially. And they're not giving accreditation to new people who are coming in. They are being very, very difficult. My cameraman last week was beaten while we were trying to cover with the Rabaa crackdown on the protest here in Cairo by police. And so it's much, much more difficult. And it's popular sentiment against, people asking, who are you interviewing? Just random people on the street do not want to see Egypt portrayed badly. And therefore, there is this media campaign in state media that foreign media is portraying Egypt badly.
Well, thanks very much, Elizabeth, for your insight. Now, joining us here in our Washington studios are two distinguished guests. Mokhtar Kamer, Communication Director to the President of the Alliance of Egyptian Americans. It is a pleasure, of course, having the opportunity to host you again on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you. I may just adjust my title. I'm the president, not the communication director.
I thought you were the president, actually.
Yeah, yes,
well, Mr. President, it's a pleasure having you again on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you.
And Sheikh El Sayed, media spokesperson for the Egyptian Americans for Democracy and Human Rights. I have to say, frankly, that I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to have you on Straight Talk Africa.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Are you the spokesperson for your group, or are you also Mr. President?
No. I am the spokesperson.
You're most welcome.
Thanks.
Well, I have to say that it is a pleasure, of course, especially having the two of you really in the studio here, because let's be very honest with us, with our audience right here. Kamer, you are in support of the military-backed government, correct?
No, that's not correct. I'm not in support of the military-backed government per se. I'm in support of the act that was done to oust the Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm in support of the revolution. People like me are waiting to see how the military are going to be acting, and we really are looking forward for the roadmap to be genuinely implemented as a way to go to real democracy later on.
Now, the last time you were on the show, I think we talked about this. You are a person clearly who believes in democracy and the rule of law, correct?
Right.
So how do you respond to someone who will ask you, then how come, frankly, you seem to be supportive of an action, frankly, that is undemocratic?
Yeah, well, that's very frankly, that is a very embarrassing thing that we had to do. And unfortunately, I do think that this is a product of the Muslim Brotherhood doing. What happened was that during the original wave of 25th of January 2011, the Muslim Brotherhood joined the military in suppressing the revolution. They got the presidency. They started to impose their interpretation of Islam all over the country. People got really upset at them. There were a lot of requests from opposition to be integrated into the political system, political regime. These were neglected by the Muslim Brotherhood. The final result was that there was a great mass of people against the Muslim Brotherhood, including those who elected them. Now, basically, there was no recourse but to go to the military, and that was not a preferred way of action. But that was the last resort, and people were desperate, and therefore they joined the military. However, our support of the military is conditioned on respecting the rule of law and on really implementing the roadmap in a democratic manner.
What about reports that the military-backed regime in Cairo reportedly ignored a Brotherhood compromise proposal to ease tensions by allowing an independent interim prime minister to run the country until a new president could be elected? What about that?
I believe the story. I think that happened already. The problem with that is that offer had been given to the Muslim Brotherhood 3 months before, and it was rejected by the president, by President Morsi. The problem here is many of the political actors, they act with a long lag. It's exactly like Mubarak. He started to refuse demands by the revolutionary, refuse, and then the ceiling goes up, and then you accept after it is too late.
But you have people dying here. You have at least 1,000 reportedly who have been killed, really.
Yes.
And then you have more than 100 security, officials also have been killed. Politics is about compromise, isn't it?
Well, it should be, but reality is different. Now, the reality is that it seems to me that it's almost like a combat zone, and it really is like a war. And each party, the Muslim Brotherhood on one side, and the security apparatus on the other side, they don't trust each other. There has been bloodshed in between them. Each party knows that if the other party wins or compromises, then maybe the winner is going to kill the defeated.
I see. What about you, Sheikh? You obviously represent the pro-Morsi group, don't you?
I do.
Yes.
I do represent the true pro-democracy movement in Egypt. It's not about Morsi.
Not specifically about the Muslim Brotherhood?
Listen, the so-called former opposition to President Morsi when he was president, they did not succeed in the ballot box. They then resorted to come to power on the back of tanks. And that is not only undemocratic, it is brutal against the revolution that took place in January 25th of 2011. They were partners in the revolution, but when they didn't win, they got their grudges on the winner. And they got their fierce attacks and serious accusations, rumors, innuendos, lies, everything goes. They lost the election and they became sour. And their sourness is what invited the military. And they were inviting the military from the beginning. And they were against Morsi even before he took office. They were asking for the thing and it's opposite from Morsi. Whenever Morsi does this, they say, no, how could you do this?
Hold it.
Yes.
We have to go for a break.
Sure.
There's no democracy here. When producer says you go, you have to go.
Tamarad is an Egyptian grassroots movement that collected over 22 million signatures of non-confidence vote by the end of June. The group also organized mass demonstrations which led to the ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. Here is a quick timeline. On April 22nd, Tamarad launches its Facebook page to build support to withdraw confidence from President Morsi. On May 16th, defeated presidential candidate and former Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq welcomes Tamarad's campaign. On May 26, former Foreign Minister Amr Moussa supports Tamarad's call for early elections. On May 29th, the Tamarad campaign says it has collected over 7 million signatures. On June 1st, Islamists announced an anti-campaign called Tagarad to reaffirm their confidence in Mohamed Morsi. On June 7th, assailants torched the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party's headquarters in Cairo.
Very much, Esther Gizuyi, and of course this is Straight Talk Africa. I am really sorry, Sheikha, I had to cut you off
That's
because unfortunately when the producer says you go, you have to go.
Sure, I
There's no
understand.
democracy in the studio.
Understand.
I hope you'll find some space in your beautiful Egyptian hat to forgive me for that.
Of course.
Could
of
you
course.
please pick up from where you
Well, I was
stopped?
saying that the opposition to President Morsi have been opposing and objecting Morsi before he took office. When he succeeded as a president in the election, he opened a forum and he said, I want to invite all presidential candidates to come. This country cannot be ruled by one party or one group. That's what he said.
Right.
And he invited them. Guess what the response was from a democratic force? One of them said he has to resign first and then we can talk. The second invited person, that is candidate Abul Futuh, he said he needs to form a presidential council and he cannot make a decision without consensus. So it becomes like a guardian committee over the president that was not elected and didn't succeed. From there forward, everything was as ironic as these two positions.
Why does he seem not have been acceptable or welcomed by the non-Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, the reality now speaks to what was unknown in the beginning. In the beginning, we were dealing with this as these are opposition, they have their opinion, and Morsi started to invite them, come on, let us hear each other, let us talk, let us see, do you have an alternative to what we're doing? Do you have a better way forward? Give us any idea. They would refuse to even meet with him. Meeting with the president on his own public call, they don't. From Baradei to everybody else. So the whole thing is they want my way or the highway. The president has to move the country. So he started to work on economic projects, on farmer projects and things of this sort. They didn't like that he is succeeding despite the opposition. So they started street rallies in which they utilized thugs, street criminals, who are registered most wanted criminals. They use them in masses. We have an army of 300,000 thugs used by the Ministry of Interior to suppress people. They had them under Mubarak, they continue to use them today. The opposition never went to the street without these thugs throwing Molotov cocktail, firearms, pellets, guns, and everything there is. They used it against the Mubarak supporters. So Mubarak supporters had to clear the streets for them. So they left the Tahrir Square, they left everything for them, but they went on and on and on. So far that they went to the palace of the president throwing Molotov cocktail inside the palace. And the police was standing and giving the other side, looking at the other side.
There were reports indeed that President Morsi really wanted to, for example, have a government that reflected, frankly, the reality of Egypt.
Yes.
So what happened? How come, for example, we heard that he was supposed to appoint a vice president who could have been a Christian? That never happened. We heard
He
that,
never promised that.
But we heard about that. There were reports that he could reach out to the minority
He
Christians.
did. And he appointed some advisors, very close advisors, and assistants as Christians. He did.
Talk to us about some of perhaps the specific mistakes that you would attribute to the Morsi presidency. That may, in fact,
I would
have brought
attribute
about
to the
this.
Morsi presidency several mistakes.
One,
Number one, he was not able to establish the security in the country. But that, of course, because the previous regime never departed the security apparatus. So they had and still have control over the police, secret police, the intelligence apparatuses, the army. Everything is under the control of the previous regime.
but
So
what about reports that there was a deal between the Muslim Brotherhood and the military? For
No, there
example,
was
how
no
did
deal.
Field Marshal Tantawi step aside?
where there was no deal. The removal of Tantawi was similar to the removal of Mubarak. The army found Mubarak a drag on the regime, and they worked a deal with him, and they worked the deal that they will remove him and they will suppress the people for a bit. They will quiet the sentiment in the street. They will release him after. And that's what they actually did. They did the same with Sisi. Sisi was brought in as a good face of the military who pretended to be supporting Morsi, and he went under his skin pretending that he's a good guy, he's going to stand with legitimacy, with democracy, he will support the civilian government, but he never did.
In fact, there were some of your compatriots who feared that Morsi not Morsi, Al-Sisi, may in fact be an Islamist.
This
and
is what they say.
That is the reason why Morsi actually chose him to head the army.
Well, it is not the case. Morsi chose him based on a recommendation from the military council, because the council appoints the head of the council anyway.
Right.
So this is not about Morsi picking a person. It is the council recommending him, and they wanted their way out to change faces. Morsi agreed, and he signed him on as a partner, but he betrayed his oath. He betrayed his commitment. He betrayed his commitment to democracy, to Morsi, to the civilian government, and to the administration that Morsi was leading. He went all the way because of political inclinations on his part to go, and even when there is no demonstration, he tells people, go to the street, give me a mandate. Go to the street, give me a mandate. This is as ridiculous as a military coup could be.
Very interesting. Now, Mukhtar, we have reports that Hosni Mubarak could in fact be a free man. If true, it sort of reminds me of a situation in another African country back in 1993 in Burundi, where Melchior Ndadaye, who came from the majority Hutu ethnic community, won an election that was considered to be free, fair, transparent, and credible. You know what the military did to him? Within 3 months, they had actually killed him. Mm-hmm. And the man that he had defeated, Major Pierre Buyoya, up to today lives, and he's a senator. Yeah. What are you supposed to do, especially for a country like Egypt, really, which is one of the continent's superpowers, really? All the eyes are on Cairo. They want to see what is happening there. If democracy can't really be restored in Cairo, what about the rest of the continent?
This is a very valid question, and I do hope that democracy would be done in Egypt. It's a process, though. It's a revolution. The core of this revolution really is not only political, but is also cultural.
Cultural.
And the core of the problem is a cultural problem that this revolution is done or triggered by a vanguard or a pioneering group of younger people who are more open to the world. Mm-hmm. And these people with nothing, with nil resources, are fighting against old system of values, mm-hmm. antiquated. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't apply only to the Islamists. It does apply to the secular. It applies to, it's across the society. Although the more conservative you are, the closer you are to the right and to the old. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the Islamists is that they represent the far right of that hierarchy of value. They want to go back. Mm-hmm. It is true that they want to advance in terms of technology and science, mm-hmm. but in terms of system of values, mm-hmm. they are stuck to a medieval system of values.
But they embraced the democracy.
Who said? They said so. They said they embraced
in the process.
Well, I commented on that last time when I was here, that you can call it democratically elected president mm-hmm. to the extent that you think democracy is a ballot box. If you think of democracy as a political process, it's a totally different issue. Now you had the Muslim Brotherhood having unlimited financial resources against people who did not have any comparable financial resources. You had the organization, you had the mosques working as party bureaus for mm-hmm. all these people. You have all these sheikhs. You have religion in your hands, and you are claiming that you are representing the religion with people whose illiteracy percentage is 40%. They had a lot of tools. These elections were not fair elections, certainly, in the sense that it was not among comparable forces.
But they were not the ones that conducted the election. If it was like in several African countries where an incumbent holds an election which where he determines who constitutes, for example, the Electoral Commission, where he monopolizes, for example, state resources to his advantage, and the media, yeah, I could agree with you. But in this particular case, the only advantage, frankly, that the Brotherhood had is that these guys have been in the trenches for more than 80 years. And so at the end of the day, you only had two institutions, frankly, which were well organized, the Brotherhood and the military.
True. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, is that their problem?
The problem is
They are
that
Egyptians, legitimate Egyptians.
I beg your pardon?
I mean, should that be really used against them? Because after all,
I'm not using
they
it
are
against
the
them.
Egyptian as Muqta.
Indeed. Well, you are putting me in a corner here. A lot of Egyptians think that the Muslim Brotherhood does not act Egyptian. A lot of Egyptians right now, and I tell you why. Now, these guys, they believe in a doctrine that your homeland is your religion, it's not your country. Their supreme guide said before, the hell with Egypt, Toz for Egypt, and I hope I'm giving the right interpretation of the word Toz. He said, what is Egypt? Now, they say, and he said, one of these guys, he said that a Muslim Malaysian is closer to me than an Egyptian Copt.
In terms of values?
In terms of anything, is closer. Basically, these guys only admit the religion as the bond that supersedes the national bond. They don't, their doctrine denies nationality. They think nationality is bad. They think nationality is against Sharia. This is an antiquated doctrine, and it doesn't work. Their models did not work in Afghanistan. Their models did not work in the Sudan. Their models did not work by Zia ul Haq in Pakistan. And still they want to apply the same thing with variations. So that
the
is
model
my...
works in some places. It works in Turkey, doesn't it?
That's not their model.
I see.
When the prime minister of Turkey came to Egypt and he said secular, they didn't want to bid farewell to him at the airport. Okay.
Well, Muqta, you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll have more on in our discussion in a moment. But first, here is Mariama Diallo. Take it away, Mariama.
Well, thanks, Shaka. Still to come, we'll reveal some of the fantastic feedback we've received from our audience through social media. But for now, here is a quick response from a viewer to our question of the week. In our letter of the week, Christopher Mwakaje from the Institute of Social Work in Tanzania writes, "It seems exactly like a battlefield. My God, where is Egypt? The country that is full of world history, the home of civilization. I think peace will be restored when the citizens realize the real agenda for their reform and take responsibility as Egyptians."
Welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. Once again, it's time to bring in my colleague and social media reporter, Mariama Diarra. Take it away again, Mariama.
Well, thanks, Shaka. To piggyback on your discussion, Egypt has indeed been embroiled in political turmoil. The streets of Cairo have become ground zero for thousands of Muslim Brotherhood supporters who stand in defiance of the nation's military-backed interim government. The demonstrators are refusing to accept the ouster of democratically elected President Mohamed Morsi. Well, this brings us to our question of the week, which asks, will the anti-government protest in Egypt present an opportunity for democracy to grow, or will the nation return to authoritarian rule? Well, we'll get right to your reactions and start with Saidi Msonga in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, who writes, "What's happening in Egypt now is the outcome of military democracy, which is contrary to democracy and taking over and not respecting people's decision. It will be very difficult to turn around." Another comment comes from Eliasu Amadou Absa from the University of Professional Studies in the West African capital, Accra, in Ghana, saying it will be very difficult for democracy to grow since a democratically elected president was overthrown and nothing is being done about it. Shaka?
Interesting Mariama, let me come to you, Sheikh.
Yes.
You had the question, is it possible, for example, to talk about military democracy? It would seem to me, frankly, that when you look at the military and democracy, there are fundamental differences here.
We know that the military council took over from Mubarak during the 2011 revolution. And for a year and a half, they kept resisting everything democratic. They kept using the judiciary, the police force, the intelligence apparatuses to stifle the democratic process. With the help of the judiciary, they dissolved the parliament twice. They dissolved the constitutional committee once, and they wanted to dissolve it the second time. They dissolved the Shura Council, which is upper house of parliament, once. They wanted to dissolve it the second time. All of these are anti-democratic. Right before the second round was announced, the military council announced a constitutional declaration to strip the presidency from its basic powers. And Morsi had to fight back after he took office to reclaim his basic powers to function. And they support this kind of approach and claim to be democratic. I am really puzzled with this. I am really puzzled that they are building, and because of what they call ideological differences. We are a Muslim nation. We have 95% of the population who come up with Islamic inclinations. Should we suppress it or should we work for them?
We'll come to
The
that.
government is supposed to serve people's expectations. That is people's expectations. They resent it. They cannot win because they are anti-people, anti-sentiments of the public. The public refuse to have them. They are taking it on Ikhwan, on Morsi, on Brotherhood.
But Mukhtar told you a little bit earlier, and please respond very, very briefly here, that there is a perception that Muslim Brotherhood do not, if I may quote his words, do not act Egyptian.
Yeah, I don't know what he means. He can explain, but the only thing that they are not acting as Egyptian as he expects is that they did not respond with Molotov cocktail with bullets. That would have been Egyptian. They did not act against the street violence with their own violence. That would have been Egyptian.
We'll come to that.
They did not shut the media when they attacked Morsi and his followers. That would have been Egyptian.
We'll come
so they
because,
are anti-Egyptian in that way.
We'll come to that because, of course, there are allegations that you are doing a bit of that. In fact, some say that you are torching churches and what have you, but we'll come to that. Mariama, what else are people saying on Egypt?
Well, we're going to move on to another posting from Dominique Bunduka from Freetown in Sierra Leone, who posted this on our Facebook page, saying, from my point of view, the people of Egypt need authoritarian rule because they do not seem to encourage democracy. Very interesting. And finally, Owili Clement, who goes to the Kampala International University, but he told us he's originally from Kitgum in the northern part of Uganda, writes, the army has set a precedent that it can remove any leader due to protest from the opposing side. Even if they hold another election, the same thing that happened to Morsi will reoccur because 1 year in power was simply too early to judge Morsi's credibility. Well, Shaka, two more excellent comments. It's a very complex situation ongoing right now in Egypt, and finding a peaceful solution to the political standoff is definitely proving to be very difficult.
Indeed, very difficult. What about that, Mukhtar? You still cling to being the land of the pharaohs or the land of King Farouk? After all, we know that back in 1952, the Muslim Brotherhood, they basically were in alliance with the great Colonel Gamal Abdul Nasser in 1952. And of course, you know what happened 2 years later.
Yes.
What is it that they continue to do wrong? Is it because, as you said earlier, that they don't act Egyptian?
In a nutshell, including, number one, their doctrine is, as I said, is the model is not working. They are clinging to the model that is failing.
Which model is that?
The model is...
Of the pharaohs?
No. They don't like the pharaohs, by the way, and they think that the Egyptian ruins are idols and stuff. But anyway, the model is that they cling to the model of the Islamic Empire, that you have to have one Muslim state ruled by a caliph and have a shura council, not democracy, but shura council, and you have to work for that. And therefore, a decision making, a strategic decision making, if he belongs to the Salafi or the Muslim Brotherhood, the national interest of Egypt may be subordinated for the interest of some other Muslim country. They view the map not from Cairo. One of their supreme guide during the election campaign said, Islamic Caliphate, and the capital is Jerusalem. I want whoever is exposed to ruling and governing Egypt to understand that the capital is Cairo and the country is Egypt. There is nothing, no such a thing now, like from Spain to Indonesia. This is one empire.
Now, when
we
you
are
talk
not
about-
in the 12th century, and that is their quotes, by the way.
When you talk about Jerusalem, how do you think the Palestinians would feel listening to you?
Well, that's
Or the
not,
Israelis,
nothing
for that
against the
matter.
Palestinians. What the Palestinians say, we want a Palestinian state and its capital is Cairo? Or would Saudi Arabia say, we want a Muslim state, capital is Morocco?
We'll come to that. Let me come back to you, Mukhtar. We're talking about revolution and what have you. Do you sincerely feel, if you were to talk to me from the deepest, better part of your Egyptian heart and soul, do you sincerely still feel that there was or there is still revolution in your country? Or is this like the 1910 Mexican frozen revolution?
I sincerely feel that I hope that the revolution would be completed. It is a very complicated thing. Egypt is a country with very complicated geographic, geopolitical, cultural, cross-cultural compound, and therefore I don't expect the process to be easy. I hope that the thing will succeed and it wouldn't end up being something like the 1848 revolution in Europe, which most analysts, by the way, they believe that it will end up at some in-between point, not real successful revolution and not back to as it was. And they compare that to the 1848 revolution in Europe, where there was a combination of things and it took a long time. I hope that wouldn't happen because Egypt really is in need of a new thinking, new hierarchy of value. We don't need to go back. We want to go forward, not go back.
Interesting. What about you, Sheikh? What about the fact that no one seems to be calling on the international community, for example, to have a general LCC at The Hague, the International Criminal
All the Egyptians
Court?
are doing that.
I don't hear that.
There's a huge movement in Egypt to send him to The Hague. There's a huge movement in Holland itself. Holland did not recognize the coup, and they withdrew their ambassador, and they are calling for the trial of General al-Sisi at The Hague for the war crime that he has done. Crimes against humanity, killing demonstrators with bullets, live bullets in the streets of Cairo.
You call it a coup?
Thousands of people.
You call it a coup? There are people who say it was people power.
I will use Senator McCain and Senator Lindsay's statement. If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it must be a duck.
Very
If it is
interesting.
military calling the shot, military appointing the government, military controlling the street, and you tell me this is a people's coup? So it's a coup. People's coup? No, it's not people's coup. The military took the lead. The military is calling the shots until today, and literally so. They are calling the shots at mosques where people end up hiding in hundreds. They burn the entire mosque. You talk about burning churches. I have it on my computer here. Church leaders in Egypt have made videotapes. I will send it to you. They come in Arabic, but you pull any translator in the world and have him translate it for you. They say, we gave a mandate to al-Sisi and he sent his street thugs to burn our churches.
So it is essentially what you are saying
They
is
did
that
it before. Mubarak regime bombed a church called the Church of the Qiddisin, the Two Saints, in Alexandria. They sent a street thug, giving him a car,
and blamed.
and the court found that they did it. The government thugs did it by the Ministry of Interior support. They gave the bombed car to a person, told him, drive it to that place and we'll set you free.
Is that the reason perhaps why reports suggest that the government and the military indeed are not providing security.
No, they are providing
Christians?
chaos. The purpose is to fail the nation. They wanted Egypt to fail. This is the fourth generation warfare that has been spoken about for years now in Washington. The fourth generation warfare is not to send your army, is not to send your generals, but to use the local generals to fail the country. Then it becomes a prey. It happened in Somalia, it happened in Sudan, it happened in Iraq, it's happening in Syria.
Mukhtar, do you agree with this scenario? That
It is
it
the
is
reality.
possible that the military, in fact, may be doing this? And if they were actually doing that, what would be the motive? Is it because it would give them an opportunity to declare a state of emergency? It would give them an opportunity to stay away from perhaps bringing a new constitution? It would give them an opportunity to stay away from perhaps even trying to hold an election?
Are we talking about the possibility of the military taking over and governing the country directly? Is that what we are talking about?
Yes, but before that, we have to
Sure,
go for a break.
sure.
A reminder that you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. Today's topic, Egypt in crisis. We'll continue our discussion in a moment, so please don't go away.
Once again, Tamarad is an Egyptian grassroots movement that collected over 22 million signatures of non-confidence vote by the end of June. The group also organized mass demonstrations which led to the ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. Here is a quick timeline. On June 26, Tamarad forms the June 30th Front, which calls on Morsi to transfer his powers to a prime minister who represents the revolution. On June 29th, Tamarad announces it collected over 22 million signatures for a non-confidence vote against Morsi. On July 14th, Tamarad's co-founder Mahmoud Badr rejects an invitation from the U.S. Embassy to discuss the political crisis. Finally, on July 29th, he rejects the European Union's suggestion of a safe exit for Muslim Brotherhood's leaders.
And welcome back. If you have just joined us, we are discussing Egypt in a crisis. Our two distinguished guests are Mokhtar Kamer, Communication Director, rather President actually, of the Alliance of Egyptian Americans, and Sheikh El Sayed, media spokesperson for the Egyptian Americans for Democracy and Human Rights. I have to say, gentlemen, once again, I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host the two of you on Straight Talk Africa.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
You're most welcome, sir. Now, Mukhtar, what is the way forward, really? How do we get from where we have been detracted from? Because Egypt needs democracy.
Yes.
There's no question that, when it comes to democracy, history is not on the side of Egypt. This is perhaps the first experiment, frankly, that we attempted about a year ago.
In a sense, yes, I agree with you in a sense. However, there are there are always exceptions, possible exceptions. We, as revolutionaries, defined as people who are looking for a new paradigm. We are sick and tired of waking up and sleeping, eating the same breakfast, smashed potatoes. We are hearing the same discourse that we have been hearing for 1,400 years. Those people who think that going to the medieval ages is a solution should change. And I do think now the circumstances, especially the economic impoverishment and in combination with the geopolitical problems of the country, are going to cause all the old to collapse. Now, for an important faction, political faction, like the Muslim Brotherhood, what I wish for them, if they want to survive, they have to change, they have to renovate. They cannot put their ideas in a museum and ask people to follow them. If they change, if they give their young people a chance, their leadership is so arrogant with their own younger people, I want them to have new oxygen. I want every Muslim to really benefit from that. I want progressive Islam, not a medieval Islam.
How do you respond to that,
It is like somebody coming to tell the African people, you've been to Africa too long, you have to be European to fit in the modern world.
Really?
That's exactly it. And so long as they claim to be democratic, and this is the language of demeaning the culture of the people will never elect them. They know it, I know it, and they memorize their history. That's why they go to the military to come on the back of the tank rather than going through the ballot box. They will never win so long as they call Islam medieval culture, so long as they call the culture of the
Islam.
people
That's your
too old.
interpretation of Islam. I'm not talking
I didn't
about
interrupt you.
Islam.
I didn't
Mukhtar,
interrupt
please,
you.
let him finish his
I
point.
didn't interrupt you. So long as they call Islam medieval, when it was medieval in Europe, it was the epic of civilization in the Middle East. But they don't want to recognize us. That's their problem. They want to talk to people down and people to bring them up. If it didn't happen in Africa, it's not going to happen in Egypt, because Egypt is one of the old African countries. We're very proud of our religion, very proud of our history, very proud of our culture. They want us to follow their limited culture, their definition of freedom, their definition of democracy, which comes on the back of the tank. That's their hope. They are setting their hope on the military. We're setting our hope on the people.
Don't you have allies in the military? I mean, some
No,
of these are your
the
brothers,
military,
they are children,
the
your
military,
sons.
no. The military for decades since Nasser was cleansed. Cleansed is even a light word. It was totally cleansed from anybody who keeps up with their prayer, who goes to the mosque, who keeps up with his religion. They cannot grow even a beard in the military or even in the police.
Very
So
interesting.
there is no religiosity in security apparatuses, not the military, not the intelligence, not the police.
How do you respond, Mukhtar, to those who are saying that the reason Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates are supporting the new regime in Cairo is precisely because democracy is the last thing, for example, those countries really would like to happen on their own soil?
I will answer that, but I want to, after I answer that briefly, I want to comment on two
Sure,
problems I
sure.
have with Sheikh Shakir, what he said. Concerning Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, of course, they don't want democracy. But their fear from the Muslim Brotherhood is not because they are fearing that the Muslim Brotherhood is going to affect democracy. Their fear from the Muslim Brotherhood is that they are fearing of competitiveness. They think that the Muslim Brotherhood has inroads in the Gulf, has clout in the Gulf, they have comparable doctrines, and they don't want a Republican model of Islam, of political Islam. That's basically the motive of Gulf countries.
You think they want to introduce a theocracy of sorts?
Who?
Like
The,
the Muslim Brotherhood?
Of course.
Like
This
Iran?
is a theocracy.
Like Iran, for example?
Yeah, this is a theocracy. And the reason, if I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood right now, they're talking about the people, they're talking about the revolution, as if they are the ones who triggered the revolution, as if they're the ones who cooperated with the revolution, although they are the very first one who deviated from it and betrayed it. I'm sorry to say that, very frankly.
What about their philanthropic contributions to the poor, for example, in Egypt?
That's for political gain. Of course.
So they are doing what the state is supposed to do.
That's true. They replace the state. Now, I want to get into two basic points rather than exchanging at the micro level. I
Right.
have two problems with what's being said.
Right.
Number one, interpretation. The Muslim Brotherhood interpretation of Islam is opposing Islam. I do not accept that. They are making themselves a spokesman for God and show me the contract if this
Really?
is the case. I do not accept it. I'm sorry. Number two is one of the problems, unfortunately, is hypocrisy. They have been accusing everybody who contacts the West as being an agent, as being so and so and so. Now they're resorting to the West. Now they are talking about The Hague. Now they are talking about the United Nations and so on, which is acceptable to me. What is unacceptable is that it's good for them, bad for any other person.
Don't you accept the fact that they really try to play by the rules?
What does this mean?
Well, by participating in a democratic process? Not once, but twice.
They are twisting the rules.
But how are they twisting the rules? They were not controlling the Electoral Commission, Mukhtar.
I give you an example. I give you an example, for instance, when it is said that the President Morsi, during his presidency, he invited the opposition to talk to him and they refused. What happened precisely was that whenever he found himself in a problem, and it was not Mr. Morsi who really governed Egypt. It was the guidance office or the Bureau of the Muslim Brotherhood who governed with him.
Do you have empirical evidence on that?
The only evidence that I can give you, I don't have documents, of course, but the evidence I can give you, if the Muslim Brotherhood was so popular, why did the people come out in the streets on the June 30th against them? No 1 second, no military effort would have done to them what have been done to them had it not been a wide popular support against the Muslim Brotherhood and big hatred towards them.
You have the last word. Of course, we have heard about the politics of numbers. You have the last word.
Well, basically, unfortunately, there's a lot of lies in the claims. One of the major lies is that it was not Morsi governing, it was the guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, but no evidence to that. One of the other lies is Morsi only called for people to come as opposition to help him when he was in crisis. In fact, they created the crisis, and Morsi is trying to tell them, come, be helpful and guide the process, and let's move forward together. They refuse. They refused. Baradei refused, Hamdin refused, all of them refused. But before I go forward, I want to say something.
You have a minute.
They opposed Morsi before he had made anything. Once he was elected, they opposed him.
But some of these people, by the way, voted for him.
Yes, but when they discovered or feared that Ikhwan are going to do this, Ikhwan are going to, the fear that was pumped in the media and drilled in the hearts of people, there's more than 100 satellite channels in Egypt, all of them owned by the old regime, by the Mubarak financiers. So could you imagine a president who doesn't have his media, who doesn't have nothing, he doesn't even control his own palace security.
Forces, yeah.
He has nothing. And they want him to do everything. When he changed the general prosecutor to prosecute truly the killers of the revolutionaries, they came against him. You are a dictator, you are this, you are this. These guys don't know what they want except one thing. They want the Muslim Brothers to fail, even if it means the failing of the country. They have it. The military now is in control, and they cannot continue their lies forever.
You have 20 seconds. What would you like to see the United States do in as far as your country is concerned? Because
to act with integrity once for a change.
It says
President Obama promised in Cairo, of all places, that he would support democracy. Until now, he did not do anything to support it.
On that note, thanks to our distinguished guests, Mukhtar Kamer of the Alliance of Egyptian Americans and Sheikh El Sayed of the Egyptian Americans for Democracy and Human Rights. Thanks to our affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners, we thank you for tuning in. If you're listening to us on the Voice of America, learning